That Davis Show, and we're lucky enough to be joined by Carmen Vitali, Buccaneers staff writer. You can find her works at TampaBayBuccaneers.com. Follow her at Carmi V. Carmi, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
I mean, I feel like you're doing better than fantastic, to be honest with you. Like,
why? Because I've got this team around me that I get to talk about so much.
Yeah, like, to be honest, like, all right. Last year compared to years past, right? Because you've been on this gig for a nice little amount of time. You're not a newbie. So I can actually ask you this. Last year compared to years past had to feel like just ecstasy, right? I mean, you're working. Of course you're working, but having to develop articles about 30 for 30 or whatever's taking place compared to the beginning of last year, basically you had to have a feeling you had a chance to get to the Super Bowl. Maybe it was a little meandering. Here in Chicago, you took an L from us up here in Chicago. All right, your quarterback forgot.
I'm very well versed in that. I'm from the area, so.
Oh, really?
I grew up outside Chicago.
Oh,
in Elmhurst.
Oh, so whoa. Who's your football boo then? Your team?
Well, so I mean, I grew up a Bears fan. I feel like Bucs fans know that about me by now. And obviously, I'm much more invested in this team right now, given that they're my employer.
Yes.
But right. I grew up in the early '90s and early 2000s, and didn't when the Bears didn't and still kind of don't have an offense to speak of. So I gravitated towards defense. That's something I've carried with me my entire life, just because of my circumstance.
That's so Chicago. I'm sorry for you.
It is.
Boy, listen, that quarterback may be nice, but did you see that defense over there? Oh, man.
Exactly. Which you don't hear too many people, but I'm a product of my environment. So, and we've got a very good defense here to speak of.
Yes, you do. But so how was that transition from years past into this year? But also I feel like it's carrying over into this season because it seems like the party shouldn't stop. You got it seems like you should still be celebrating really until something if the team goes off track. But even if it goes off track, it should be easy to get it back on track. But again, to get to that question, how was the difference between the Jameis years and what took place last season?
Yeah, it has been completely different. But I think what was so satisfying was just how validating and almost vindicating it was, because the storylines were the 30 for 30 and all that kind of stuff. But the amount of guys that went under the radar because of it was criminal to me, just because I knew these guys, I knew what they were capable of. I knew the talent that was on this team. And you say that and you hear that from all these teams that do have losing records or whatever. But that's the reality, is not everybody on the roster is bad. Just like not everybody on the roster is like fantastic. So I was just really excited to see a bunch of our guys kind of get the recognition they deserve. One being Levante David, of course. I'm the biggest proponent of Levante, and I kind of lead the charge every year for his accolades and his recognition of Pro Bowls, All Pros. The man has not had enough of them because he's been on losing teams. And now it's nice to see guys like that getting the recognition. So last year was the storylines come to you. Let me tell you, like it made me a better journalist working for a team that went back-to-back 5 and 11 years. Even, Bruce's first year, we were 7 and 9. And it makes you a better journalist because you have to figure out what to write and how to kind of toe that line a little bit more. But yeah, this year I was like, I couldn't keep up with how many things that we had to write about.
Yes, it's definitely nice. I'm envious. I hope one day back here at home that we're in that situation where, of course the teams win, because a lot of people think people in the media want the team to suck. But when the team's doing well, it's better for everyone. It's so much the story easier. Writes itself. Yeah, the story writes. But you talked about the players, and I agree with you, because when Tom Brady chose the Bucs, to me it made common sense, because it was basically like ready-made, just throw the quarterback in the middle of it. There was talent. I think if you know football, there was talents galore around on that team. You just needed someone to steady the ship. Some people have the train of thought, Carmen, that if you don't make any adjustments and you stand still, not necessarily just a step back, but you're still not taking the next step. Is there any fear of that with bringing back 22 starters, both on the offensive, defensive side?
Honestly, to be quite honest, I had almost the same thought process, because the NFL stresses if you're not getting better, you're getting worse, right? It's like that Ricky Bobby, if you're not first, you're last. It's and I think that there is some credence to that, but I also don't think that happens on a team that has Tom Brady at quarterback. He is the last guy to repeat as champions, and I just think that he brings an accountability and a motivation to this team that, I mean, I think the danger of that is that you rest on your laurels, right? And you think, oh, well, I was this good last year, so I don't have to change anything. That's not the attitude on this team at all, and that's very apparent, and especially because these guys weren't playing their best football the entire season. It took them until the team's bye week in week 13 to really click on offense. And I just remember there's this quote where Tom Brady is walking off the field with Devin White from the NFC Championship game after winning in Green Bay. And they're just going, we haven't even played our best football yet. And that's kind of true in a lot of ways because they had just started to gel. And so if they can pick up where they left off, they still have not reached their ceiling. So I think that, when you make it to the top mountaintop, you think, all right, that's as good as it gets. But this team knows that they've got more in them. And that's why I don't really feel like it's a danger for this team in particular. Although I do subscribe to that, where you always want to try to get better.
That Davis show right now, we have Carmen Vitali, a staff writer for the Bucs, joining us. Let me ask you this, and sticking with the offense, it's important since you brought up that bye week and what took place. With having an actual preseason and a training camp ran not regularly due to COVID, but at least it's closer to what it was pre-pandemic. How do you think this offense is going to look now with that time to adjust now? Is it going to be more of a New England or more risk it, no biscuit? What do you think the offense is going to look like?
Well, I think it's a marriage of the two, and to marry two totally polar opposite systems is no easy task, and that's why it took so long last year. And I think you're going to see more of that this year. I mean, there's no way that Bruce gives up his no risk it, no biscuit type mentality, but there are ways to marry the two together, and I think that that's what you're going to end up seeing. And at the end of the day, Bruce is very amenable to what his quarterbacks want to do. He knows that quarterbacks aren't going to want to run plays that they don't like. So quarterbacks are very involved in game planning on this offense, and Tom Brady is obviously no exception. He might be the most involved in game planning just because of his experience and because of the system he came from, and meshing that with the ideals and concepts that Bruce Arians likes to run as well. But let me tell you, I mean, we've seen Brady throw deep all last year, way more than I feel like we had in recent years. He's not slowing down. We've seen him in camp do the exact same thing at 44 years old, which is incredible. So he still has the talent to do it and the talent to execute a Bruce Arians offense. So he's going to do it. He's still going to do it. You're still going to see those fun deep shots and all that.
I'm jealous. All right.
No.
In your opinion, I am. I mean, it's hurtful. I mean, at least, during the preview for this show, going from division to division, no one kind of knows my angst. So to find out that you feel this, well, you felt this pain, I should say. I have. You felt it. I at least know that. How would you, in your opinion, how would you describe the relationship between Bruce Arians and Tom Brady?
They're so much fun together. Honestly, they feed off each other so well. Bruce is just he really lets his quarterbacks do what they're there to do. And he wants to make sure that he's getting the best out of them, but that they're having input on everything. So it's a give and take. You'll hear Bruce say that all the time. But I really think, you can see how much Tom Brady has kind of loosened up a little bit. I feel like that's always been a big storyline, although I'm not sure that this wasn't always here with him. I just don't know that he was given the platform to express it from his head coach. And we all know Bruce. He pulls no punches and he tells it like it is. And that's kind of how everyone follows suit on this team. And so you see that between Bruce and you see that with Brady. And I mean, it's with that entire quarterback room and the quarterback coaches. I mean, this team is just so set up. We drafted Kyle Trask in the second round, and I just don't know a better situation for a young quarterback to come in, not only because of Tom Brady, but you've got Bruce Arians, the quarterback whisperer. You have Byron Leftwich, who's a longtime quarterback in this league, Clyde Christensen, who's coached guys like Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck. The amount of offensive firepower is just crazy in that room in general. So it's really cool to see them all feed off of each other and kind of come up with things together.
It must really be nice. It sounds like it's really nice how you just broke that down.
Listen, I didn't know what quarterbacking was until I got here. I promise.
It sounds fantastic, Carmen. This Byron Leftwich, sounds fantastic. Look, on a side note, this just popped out into my head. with Bruce. Recently, when I've seen Bruce Arians, I haven't seen the Kango. Where's the Kango at? Especially being a man of color, we have an affinity for Kangos. Where is his Kangos?
Yeah, he switches it in and out now with he's got his baseball caps too. He's a man of many styles. He's the swaggiest coach in the NFL, and I maintain that. So trust me, he gets his fits off, and everyone has their look at practice though. I feel like every coach has their look at practice, and Bruce is actually at practice is actually usually a ball cap more than it is the Kangol. But trust me when I say he brings out the Kangol for all the special occasions, like our ring ceremony, everything like that. He's wearing that with a 3-piece suit, and he looks swagged out. This man he knows what he's doing.
Okay. So listen, do these two, Tom Brady and Bruce Arians, ride off together? How long do you expect for this to continue? And also, when Bruce Arians retires, is this Todd Bowles' job?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and it's definitely it makes sense. Like if you were to kind of hand this team back over, I mean, we are also so lucky on this coaching staff to have 2 head coaches. I mean, Todd Bowles was a head coach for 5 years, so 4 seasons. So like having that built in is a really interesting prospect. And again, that would be something very unique in this league to see that change of the guard happen. But I'm not sure, it's really interesting because Brady was like, oh, I want to play till I'm 25 or 45. I'm like, he looks 25. I want to play till I'm 45. That's next year. And he doesn't show any signs of slowing down this year. And I'm like, if the Bucs win the Super Bowl again, do you ride out on top like that? I don't know. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But like, I'm telling you what, like you look at this guy and you're like, you're not 44. Like you're just not. And Bruce is the same way where he's just, I mean, he gets fired up. We've seen him in these preseason games already, just biting refs' heads off. He's in midseason form already. So like this guy and he's really, really well set up when it comes to speaking of those coordinators, Todd Bowles, Byron Leftwich. I mean, Byron Leftwich is the play caller on the offense. Bruce doesn't have that pressure on him. He doesn't have that stress on him, I should say. So he's got it pretty good right now where he kind of commands the ship, but he doesn't have to take the day-to-day beating. And that's the reason he doesn't call plays is because the stress was getting too much. So, I mean, between the two of them, I don't know. I feel like as long as Tom Brady plays, Bruce will coach and maybe vice versa. I'm not totally sure, but you do have a very more than viable option waiting in the wings to take over should that be the case.
I look forward to when Byron Leftwich gets a real chance to interview and get a head coaching job, being someone that's loved him since Marshall back in the days. I look forward to that. Getting to the draft, what are your expectations? You guys are loaded, and I'll get to the loaded aspect, but you added to the loadedness. You have Joe Tryon Soyinka. The kid's been playing well in preseasons. What's your expectations of having him rotate in with the linemen that you already have killing quarterbacks around the league?
Yeah, it's kind of like I get a little embarrassed because it's the rich get richer situation. Honestly, it's incredible to think that Joe Tryon fell to us at 32. And I think that there's going to be 31 teams that are going to be kicking themselves after this season with just his potential and seeing what we've seen. I mean, seeing him in person, I watched a lot of his tape and all that kind of stuff, but that was 2 years ago. And I think it's going to be a case study because he opted out for the COVID year last year. Whatever he was doing in that time, he got better. And like he became more of a technician. He molded his body and whatever he did, I think it'll be a case study for college players. Like if you have that motivation, that self-motivation and that self-accountability, I mean, it's kind of worth it to not put the wear and tear on your body of a college football season. And now he comes in, he's super fresh. He's just chomping at the bit to get onto this field. And, even the preseason game, he just talked about how excited he was to get back on a football field. But my gosh, can he dominate? It's incredible to see. I mean, I saw him physically just run over Tennessee linemen in the last preseason game, like immediately following a sack. And I mean, this is a guy too that I've seen in practice has put Rob Gronkowski on his butt. And if you can put Rob Gronkowski on his butt, like with one hand most of the time, that's insane. Gronk is a huge human and he's very good at blocking. He's a very good blocking tight end. I let him tell it. He's only a blocking tight end, but I have my expectations for this kid. I'm trying to like temper them But he also then has Shaq Barrett and JPP to learn from. And he's got outside linebackers coach Larry Foote to learn from. And I don't see a scenario where this kid doesn't end up to be an amazing player for this defense.
Yeah, and I read JPP just raving about him having techniques that he didn't have as a rookie. So 30 teams, though, Carmen. 30 teams, not 31. All right. We're happy with what we did in the first round this year.
That's fair. I was so proud of the Bears. I really was. I promised you that. I was texting my friends back in Chicago like, I'm so proud.
We don't want your pity, Carmen. We don't want your pity.
It's not a pity. I'm just excited for you, I promise.
Look,
well, I'll be excited for you, except when the Bucs come in, or when you guys come down here and play.
Okay. But in your heart, we know. I know what you have to do with the JOB, but we know. All right, the team is loaded.
I'm very happy for y'all.
If there's any weaknesses for this team, who are the players, or what would you point out as far as schematically the weaknesses?
Honestly, I'm going to go be towards a phase of the game that even Bruce talked about coming into this season, which is special teams. I think that there's still a lot to figure out there, and there's still a battle for the kick returner jobs. You don't have that solidified, and just in general, you're not getting the production out of them that you really want at this point. That was a big emphasis in this draft, just because you didn't have a lot of needs, obviously. So the last 4 picks of the draft for the Bucs were really just meant for guys that they felt like could make an appearance on special teams and kind of make their bread and butter on special teams. So I'm going to see how that goes. Even as far as the kicking game too, Ryan Succop has kind of had an up and down camp. Bruce has not been shy about saying that. But he did kick a 49-yard field goal against the Titans, which were unfortunately the Bucs' only points last game. But so you would like to see, the consistency out of him, because he was so automatic last year for the Bucs. And I don't know if you know anything about Tampa Bay and their kicking curse. But it's been a thing here. And ever since I've been here, we've just cycled through some really awful situations. And Ryan Succop was kind of finally this guy that came in and was so super consistent. So to see him have an up and down camp, you're like, oh God, not this guy.
Yeah, we know a little
bit. I'm looking towards that. But Bruce also said he has all the faith in the world that Ryan will figure it out. And I do too, because he is a vet and he knows what he's doing. So I'm hoping that, that, and then of course injuries. That's really what I feel like can bring down this team. It can bring down any team at any time, but I don't think this team is the deepest that it could be, especially on defense. So you lose a couple key players, and you're going to have to make some adjustments, some pretty significant adjustments. And of course, the quarterback. I mean, Tom Brady is 44 years old, but he played through a torn MCL last year, so
right.
I think he's as tough as they come. So if he's not missing a limb, I think he'll be out there.
That Davis Show. Right now we have Carmen Vitali. Follow her at Carmi V. Listen, what are your expectations for Antonio Brown now? Because he came in when the season had basically already not when the season had started, but he came in late, I should say. All right, we know him and Brady kind of had a connection in New England, but that was cut short with all the off-field stuff that was going on with Antonio Brown. Your expectations for him and Brady this season, and will they be really try to prove something, or is there enough balls to go around for them to prove something? And even more importantly, Brady and Mike Evans. So this is a twofer, because I've loved Mike Evans for a long time. But it's and they definitely had some plays, but it still seemed like they didn't have that connection that you think they could have, because if Brady and Mike Evans really have a connection, there's going to be some trouble.
Yeah, I mean, Brady's really never had a receiver quite like Mike. I mean, you go back to his years with Randy Moss, but they're not quite the same player, obviously, though Mike does look up to Randy. He calls Randy Moss his idol, and he broke his NFL record of 7 straight 1,000-yard seasons to begin a career last year. But I think that was really a symptom of just getting used to this offense and getting used to, I mean, there's a lot of option routes here, and there's a lot of stuff that you have to read as a quarterback, and the timing with your receivers just doesn't come without reps. And they just needed that, and they've gotten it now. So I expect a bigger year from Mike. But I mean, Mike still had over 1,000 yards. He had the most touchdowns he's ever had in a single season last year. He had 13 touchdowns. His previous high had been 12. So I think as you're also seeing him utilized, he's such a good red zone target because he's so big. And so that lends itself to a lot of production as far as scoring goes for him. So I think you can expect that. I don't think you're going to see any of these receivers top 1,200 yards, 1,100 yards, just because there are only so many balls to go around. And you've got Chris Godwin, you've got Scotty Miller, you've got Tyler Johnson, who stepped up this camp. He's a second-year receiver, last year's draft picks. So, and then you look at Antonio Brown, and you're now going to have a full season with him because he didn't come in until the 8th game of the season last year. So now, I mean, he's so fast and he's so elusive and he can get that separation. And we've heard Bruce Arians saying that this looks like the Antonio Brown from 4 or 5 years ago. I think that put a lot of people on notice when he said that, because the Antonio Brown from 4 or 5 years ago was pretty insane. And to imagine him fitting into an offense and playing his role and not trying to be, that he's not necessarily that superstar, but he's accepted that role. And to have, to share all of this with Mike Evans, with Chris Godwin, that whole receiver room has a great rapport with each other. They're very unselfish players for how good they are. So it'll just be very interesting to see how everything kind of lays itself out. But I would expect a lot of production this year, especially because Brady is that much more comfortable in this offense.
Carmen, something just popped in my mind. What do you expect to happen after this season with Chris Godwin playing on the franchise tag? Will there be enough money? And I guess perhaps because how you set up his contract, but do you see his long-term future in Tampa, or has there been too many guys re-signed from last year that is going to probably maybe block him from getting the type of money he's looking for?
I don't know that necessarily precludes him, just because of the kind of player that Chris is. He can play all those different receiver spots, and he's so versatile in that. And, he's a homegrown player, and our GM, Jason Light, has placed a huge emphasis on keeping those homegrown players, those guys that you drafted. He gets extremely attached to these guys, which is a good thing. And you like to think that, they kind of return the favor. And I know that Chris loves it here. He loves playing with Mike. He loves, the system that they're in. But again, next year is going to be very interesting, just from a purely contract perspective, because you've got a lot of guys. You kind of leveraged everything this year against the future a little bit more. But let me tell you, if anybody can figure it out, it is our cap guru, Mike Greenberg, and our director of football research, Jackie Davidson. Both of those, they are such a stellar tag team. And they're the reason that the Bucs were able to bring all 22 starters back, because of some really creative accounting as far as that went. So if anybody can do it, it's them. But I mean, I like to think that Chris really likes it here, and he said he really likes it here. And I don't think that any other contracts necessarily impose on his. I think that it'll just be a matter of what all ends up shaking out. And I'm very interested to see how that goes, because I do think that there will be some pretty hard to swallow changes, just because there will have to be.
Understandable. Look, the NFC South belongs to the Bucs. How do you think the rest of the division will shake out? So Carmi V's preview of the NFC South.
Yeah, listen, that statement, though, is something that is so foreign to me, because even last year, the Bucs entered the playoffs as a wild card. That was Tom Brady's first time in the NFL playoffs as a wild card team, which is crazy to think about all on its own. But I have not wrapped my head around the fact that we're predicted to win the division, because since I've been here, that's not been the case. So now I'm like, oh, and then you look at all of the turnover at a lot of the other teams, and you're like, oh gosh, not only do we have this continuity and we have this chance for success, but where we got better, I feel like a lot of the other teams in the division are going into this either rebuild, or they just are going into these changeover things. I mean, we saw the salary cap hell that New Orleans was in, and they had to cut ties with some people. And now you've also got a huge question mark at quarterback, one that the Bucs are unfortunately familiar with. And we're going to see how that works out. I'm always rooting for him, though. I mean, he was a great guy when he was here, and he is so super talented. It's just that kind of those heroics that playing Superman kind of gets him in trouble sometimes, because he never wants the play to be over. And I understand that. But sometimes obviously that's led to some very iffy things. But I do think that I'm going to be really interested to see how that offense is retailored for him, because you cannot run the same offense you had for Drew Brees with Jameis Winston. It's just not possible but Sean Payton is a brilliant play caller. I will never, you can't take that away from him. As much as this is a division rival, Sean Payton is an excellent coach. He's a great play caller. He's a great offensive mind, and he can figure it out if anyone can. So I still think that the Saints kind of end up in that 2 spot. I think the Panthers could surprise some people, just because I think their defense might be a little bit better. That secondary, which was so young last year, I feel like is going to be better this year. I really was a huge fan of Jeremy Chain coming out, and now like they put him at linebacker last year. I just don't think that he was just too undersized for that position. They're moving him back to safety this year, and so I feel like that could shake out pretty well for that defense. As far as Atlanta goes, there's just so much turnover there, and that defense needs to get a lot better. But you still have Matt Ryan, and Matt Ryan's still he's got Calvin Ridley, he's got weapons. So you're gonna, I think, still see a pretty high-powered offense from Atlanta. But between the Panthers and Atlanta, I'm not necessarily sure who goes third and fourth. But I still anticipate New Orleans being in that second spot, because maybe it's just like PTSD for me, because New Orleans has just always like kicked our butts. So I don't know.
I understand. Believe me, I understand. Listen, let's bring you home before you go back to nice weather down there in Tampa. Your thoughts on the Chicago Bears upcoming season, and how would you bring along Justin Fields?
Oh, well, this is not going to be a very popular opinion, I don't think, but I just, you see across the league when guys get time to develop behind someone else and really get used to the game and get used to the systems they're in, and get to see it in different ways. Like, I think about Patrick Mahomes, and I'm like, would he have been as instantly good if he was, for instance, drafted by Chicago and expected to start right away? Would we be seeing him this good this quickly? Because I think obviously he always had that talent, but I don't know. I think if like that redshirt year essentially behind Alex Smith, I just think pays dividends. So again, this is going to be really controversial. I don't want Justin Fields to start. I don't want him to start the season. I want him to hang back team around him to help him win right away anyway. So it's like, you let him get used to things. And I know that like Chicago fans don't have the patience for that. I don't usually have the patience for that. Maybe it's easier because I'm down here and I get to watch this football instead of having to be in Chicago and wait it out. I do understand the sense of urgency as far as, the defense goes. You're not going to be able to keep that defense intact much longer. I know that Nagy and Ryan Pace's jobs likely kind of ride on the success of Justin Fields, or he could potentially save their job. So I understand wanting to kind of prove everyone, or to prove yourselves right on him instantaneously. But I think you might be doing him a disservice by putting him into situations before he's ready. But from all of the things I've seen, the talent is there. I just hope that they manage it correctly. But again, historically, I'm probably jaded because I've never seen them manage offensive talent. Offensive talent well.
I'm with you though. I'm not a start him at the beginning of the season guy. I was a start him around the bye week guy. I'm down to maybe week 3. All right, but I want him to get.
See, you're getting everyone's getting anxious.
It's more of, I want him and Andy Reid, him and Andy Dalton to be in the same room. I think they should have packages for Justin Fields, all right, so that he can still get out there and see the live bullets in the real. And he played preseason, but it's different when you're going up against first stringers and the games
100%.
count.
100%.
Right. So I think you should have packages where each half, at least he gets out. He has a series where he can come out there and he runs the team or whatever. And you see how well he plays. If he plays, you let him continue that series, but still Andy Dalton's the starter. And then you see how that goes. And if week after week he's getting better, then you make the switch depending on how well or not so well Andy Dalton is playing. But I'm not a forget it, just start Justin guy, because I was never like that. But that hit was even more like, what?
That was
like, no.
Oh, I saw that because we had our game going on that day. And so I was busy preparing for our game. But then I saw the highlight of that. And I texted my friend who was calling the game. And I was like, was that as bad as it looked like live? And he was like, it looked worse live. And I was like, that would be like this. That would be the Bears' luck is to lose like their future of their franchise in a preseason game to a blow to the head. That was not okay. But I mean, that's kind of the risk you run in preseason, just because these guys aren't, necessarily the top tier, like most technical players that are going against him. So stuff like that happens even when it's not malicious. But that like my heart dropped. I was like, no. Right. It was. I mean, to see the helmet and the headband, and also this is the thing too. I had noticed, the headband like this. That was really bad. But also, I had noticed during the game, and I screamed at the television because I'm like, wait, strap up, because he only had the front strap on, and I was like, strap. Like, and quarterbacks sometimes do that, but from playing football, I was like, no,
strap up, youngster. Like, so when to see that happen, it was like, but it's football. But I'm with you. Whoa, let me ask you this though. So if you had to choose what part of the season you would start him, when would you start him? Or you're just like total Patrick Mahomes, just redshirt year?
Like, I just don't know what is to be accomplished other than, again, maybe saving some people's jobs, which I get. But at this point, like, are you really thinking a deep playoff run for the Bears? Even like if you bring Justin Fields in halfway through the season, or even say week 3, you bring him in. Do you think that this team is going like all the way into the playoffs and making that deep run? And if you do, all right, start him week 3. Mm-hmm. But if you don't, then I feel like you want to set yourself up for the future a lot more. But there is no, like, this delayed gratification really just doesn't exist in the NFL, especially anymore. I feel like, the expectation of rookies is just far and away. It gets worse and worse every year. Just like the fuse gets shorter, or whatever you want to call it, for these rookies, where they're just expected to step in right away. And to be fair, colleges are running pro style offenses a lot more. So you would think that these guys are a little bit better equipped also, but I don't know. I mean, if you could do it, I would do the whole season. Just, you got Dalton for a reason. You got Dalton, and you're not, like, you got Nick Foles still.
Oh, see now, it's like that in the streets. All right, how dare you, Carmen? How dare you mention Nick Foles' name on this show?
I'm sorry, listen, I'll say it's
true. No, we don't. First of all, listen, I didn't say anything when you brought up Trask. And because since there was a chance that the Bears may have drafted Kellen Mond, now those are 2 names that I don't speak, because I don't speak second and third round quarterback after getting a first round quarterback.
I don't usually either, but
yeah, that's how bougie I am right now because we have Justin Fields. I was talking to someone from KC, and I asked him, I said, you know what? I've been thinking this. If Patrick Mahomes starts at the end of that season, you guys probably still a Super Bowl, to be honest with you, because there's no tape on him. Right? I mean, just at that, he's freaky. And also, this is the thing too with Patrick Mahomes. You have Andy Reid. That's like the biggest difference between here in Chicago with Justin Fields and talking about how to bring him along is Andy Reid was doing that, and we still don't know what we have, or we know what we have in Matt Nagy, and he hasn't proven that he can do what Andy Reid did with Patrick Mahomes. So he comes from
the Reid tree. You'd hope that's kind of in there. For all those years with Andy. But no, there's no replicating Andy Reid. And there's very few people that can call plays like Andy Reid can, that can devise offensive schemes like Andy Reid can. So again, I'm just like, do you have the resources and everything to really bring him along and make sure he's ready? I don't know. I don't know.
It must be nice. It must be nice.
I know. I get to sit up here and bask in
really
my quarterback who's in his 22nd year in this
league. Wow. Just shine on us, Carmen. We really appreciate it. Everybody, make sure you check out all her work on TampaBayBuccaneers.com. Follow her at Carmi V. Keep up the great work. Now knowing that you're from this area, hats off to you. Keep on striving. Really like to hear that, even though you just disrespected the Bears all over the streets up here. I'm joking.
I didn't.
Hold them off. Whatever. Like, I know it's nice. I know. Listen, when you're rich, all right. You have an embarrassment of riches.
I'm looking long term.
I got you.
I'm like that marshmallow experiment with kids. Like, I would have waited for the other marshmallow to get 2 marshmallows. All right. So that's like the delayed gratification.
Okay. We'll check it out. We'll check it out. And we will also check you out. I look forward to you coming back on the show later on during the season. And you have a terrific day.
Thanks so much for having me.